Funding for Lawmakers comes from
the University of West Georgia in Carrollton, ensuring a better life for Georgians in the 21st century. More than 100 programs of study prepare students for successful careers in the critical professions of education and nursing, as well as business and the liberal arts. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of Georgia's business community, over 4,000 members strong, working with lawmakers for over 90 years to make sure that our state remains a place where companies thrive.
and by supporters of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thank you.
Coming up on Lawmakers, the House and Senate agree to the Conference Committee's report on the FY09 amended budget. The House takes aim at increasing regulation of food processing plants on the local level. And our leadership series of interviews continues with Senate Democratic Whip David Edelman. Those stories and more are coming up next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers. Here are your anchors, Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening, everyone. At this hour, the Senate's still in session, having just voted on Senate Resolution 277, the Georgia Trauma Trust Fund bill. That vote was 48-8, and we'll bring you more details on that as well. Also coming up on tonight's broadcast, the House votes to eliminate the universal access fee to fund rural telephone service, but fails to give passage to a measure that would prevent pharmacists from prescribing some generics.
And the Senate approves measures that would protect borrowers from subprime loans and require that every driver's license exam administered in Georgia be given in English only. But first, our top story tonight, agreement on the $18.9 billion mid-year budget. Well, the House and Senate Conferees came to an agreement today on the $18.9 billion amended 09 budget. HB 118 includes state government reductions of almost $2 billion, protecting the $428 million Homeowners Tax Relief Grant and cutting state legislative office budgets by 8%. Senate Appropriations Chairman Jack Hill presented the Conference Committee report and is followed by Senate Democratic Whip David Edelman, who reminded the Senate of the role the federal stimulus money plays.
We've done the best we could, and I think everyone would agree a very difficult year. I think we worked together very well, and I'm looking forward to that same sort of cooperation in the 2010 budget. I hope we can look back on this year and say that we've met the challenges by working together and trying to do the best that we could for the people of Georgia.
The Appropriations Committee and the governor are to be commended for continuing to run such a lean state government. But even with our lean state government, but for the federal stimulus package, we would not be able to deliver even the necessary and essential services to the people of the state.
And since the House had already passed HB 118, the Senate then voted for an immediate transferal to Governor Perdue. And the Senate passed SB 57 as well, the Georgia Fair Lending Act today. This legislation looks to protect borrowers from subprime home loans. Lawmakers Brittany Evans has the details.
The Senate Banking and Finance Chair Bill Hamrick sponsors SB 57 and explained the bill on the floor today.
This legislation is aimed at trying to set some standards for loans to people who really don't need them, and the only reason they're getting them is because somebody's making some money off of it.
The bill defines subprime loans and mortgage brokers, and according to the bill, creditors can't offer loans without reasonably and in good faith believing that the borrower can afford it. Many critics had argued for the addition of assignee liability. That would have allowed borrowers to be able to sue any subsequent buyer of the subprime loan. Senator Vincent Fort called the bill worthless without that provision.
If I steal the car from the senator from the 15th and I give it to the senator from the 5th, the senator from the 5th is a car thief too. But if you do it with a home mortgage, if you rip somebody off with a home mortgage and you sell it to a third party, that third party has almost no liability. The consumer lawyers that I talk to who are on the ground filing cases know that it's nearly impossible to hold a third party liable.
Senator Steve Thompson proposed a substitute which included assignee liability.
Or we're going to allow Georgia citizens with tens of thousands of foreclosures that have taken place not to be able to recover.
Senator Thompson's substitute was defeated, and the final vote for SB 57 was 43-9. Now that bill moves on to the House. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Brittany Evans.
And just a note, Senator Hamrick did not include assignee liability on SB 57. He says that should be a federal issue.
A bill that changes the way that food processing plants are regulated passed the House today. Evan Seitz has been following that story, and he joins us live from the Capitol with more. Evan.
Thank you, Nwandi. As a preventative measure following the recent salmonella outbreak at a peanut processing plant in Blakely, Georgia, the House took up HB 381 today, which will change certain provisions of the Georgia Food Act. HB 381 will allow for local health inspectors to enter a food processing plant or facility and check for possible cases of unsanitary food manufacturing. HB 381 will allow for local health inspectors to enter into a food processing plant or facility and check for possible cases of unsanitary food manufacturing. Representative Terry England sponsors the bill.
As you can imagine, this comes out of the problem we've had in South Georgia, the peanut butter manufacturing plant. All it does is allow local health inspectors at some point, if the commissioner so deems to be a deputy inspector, to go in and check out possible cases of food contamination. They're not allowed at any point to shut an operation down. They merely go in and look, and if there's something that they find that they deem is suspicious, they're to report it to the Georgia Department of Agriculture immediately.
Representative England also spoke on the details behind the actual health inspectors going into the facilities.
They're the trained county health inspectors. They've already been through a whole litany of training. That's their job, is to inspect food establishments. What we're looking for is folks that can go in and say, okay, there are rat droppings or there are insects or there's stuff that are visibly obvious, and have the ability then to say, okay, I'm calling in for somebody to come in and do an inspection.
HB 381 passed the House with no opposition. It will now go to the Senate. Much like with restaurants, the bill will allow for inspectors to drop in on the plants at any time, unannounced. Reporting live for Lawmakers, I'm Evan Seitz.
Thanks so much for that report, Evan. Well, efforts to restore a 4% tax on groceries may be dead for this year. House Republican leaders said this afternoon that HB 67 will not be heard in the Rules Committee tomorrow. Earlier, House Speaker Pro Tem Mark Burkhalter spoke in favor of the measure.
Right now, we have a lot of people from out of state. We have a lot of illegal immigrants who are going to the grocery stores, being exempted from a tax. And it should be a tax that's collected if they're from out of state or illegal immigrants. It's one way to collect revenues from them.
The American Association of Retired Persons has long opposed this measure, preferring to support HB 39.
We have supported the cigarette tax of $1 on cigarettes, and I know we've been asking for there to be a vote on that, and we really don't understand why they brought the grocery tax, why they're talking about bringing the grocery tax for a vote when the cigarette tax could raise more money.
House Democrats likewise oppose the measure.
It's going to be very difficult for the Democratic caucus to support taking the exemption off of food because of the effect it have on working families. These are people with kids who are struggling now.
Senate Majority Leader Chip Rogers also voiced his opposition to the measure today, saying that he remains, quote, steadfastly opposed to any measure which raises taxes on groceries or anything else for Georgia taxpayers.
Well, among the many bills that have been a subject of debate on the Senate floor today is a measure to prohibit the administration of driver's license exams in any language other than English. And Lawmakers Minu Hosseini joins us live from the Capitol with the details on that. Minu.
David, Senate Bill 67, also known as the English-only bill, would not only limit the driver's license test to the English language, but it would also limit the time frame for which a temporary license exam can be taken in any other language. Bill sponsor Jack Murphy explains.
This bill is a bill that the reason the bill is brought forth is strictly for public safety. I don't think requiring somebody to take 20 questions in English and pass the written test is too much of a burden on somebody that's wanting to establish permanent residence in the state of Georgia.
But Senator Nan Orrick expressed several concerns she had with both the language of the bill and the message the bill might send.
And my question is, if we can, in the state of Georgia, test and license people who are illiterate and cannot read. But if our state policy is to test and license people who can read no language at all, why on earth would we throw up a barrier to someone who could be proficient in their native tongue, but not proficient in English to the point of taking a driver's license? Why would we do that? What message are we sending?
Later, Senator Orrick took to the well to express her concerns.
When you seal off people's access to a legal route, to a citizenship, piece of the citizenship, a piece of legitimacy, when you seal off their access, what happens? You're forcing people to drive without a license when you throw up a barrier to getting a license.
But after much debate, Senate Bill 67 passed by committee substitute and now moves on to the House. Reporting live, I'm Minu Hosseini for Lawmakers.
Thanks so much, Minu. Well, over 90 minutes of debate pitting big business against small business, rural legislators against their urban counterparts, and landline telephones against broadband technology preceded House passage of a measure eliminating the Universal Access Fund to provide rural telephone access.
We learned in testimony that many of the companies that are receiving money through the UAF have not asked for a rate increase since the 1970s. And that was by their own testimony. So effectively, my colleagues, what we're looking at here is what began as good policy and accomplished its mission to achieve parity and supplement that activity to what has amounted to bad policy, and for lack of a better word, is nothing more than tele-welfare.
But this argument raised red flags for rural legislators from Walker County in North Georgia down to Savannah.
It's not a slush fund. For these small telephone companies, this is a safety net. Whenever you eliminate this, all of a sudden there's nothing there.
Bill's supporter, Chuck Martin, said the fund is antiquated and compared it to requiring legislators to raise money for their opponents.
In rural Georgia, we heard in testimony where fiber and broadband is being built out with funds from the Universal Access Fund to compete against the very people that put money in the fund.
HB 168 passed 123 to 42, and it now moves to the Senate.
And the Senate passed legislation from Senator Ross Tolleson today, which provides contractual and purchasing preferences by the state and local governments for Georgia-made products. Senator Tolleson explains SB 44.
It does not mandate that they purchase it. So at the end of the day, the people doing the purchasing are still in total control, but we're making sure that they're given all the information to look at the multiplier effect on the state of Georgia, to look at if they've got a $70,000 bus and there's $300 difference in the bid, that they also look at that multiplier effect and the employees, all the employees that are being employed by making these buses, so or whatever item it happens to be.
And Senate Bill 44 passed by a vote of 45 to 7. It now moves to the Senate.
The Georgia Bureau of Investigation today broke up a statewide internet child pornography ring, and the House adopted rules allowing internet child exploitation to be prosecuted, a move the bill sponsor says overturns the Georgia Supreme Court Vine decision.
I had a prosecution in Fayette County get overturned where an individual had induced a child over the internet to watch a lewd act via a webcam. And the court ultimately held, because of they felt that they were bound by the Vines precedent, that he could not be prosecuted for child molestation.
HB 123 passed 157 to 3. It moves to the Senate. The House also voted to reduce the time youth offenders may spend in detention or treatment centers from 90 to 30 days. Here's House Judiciary Chair Wendell Willard.
This is used by the juvenile courts as a means of trying to maintain, let's say, put a child in a situation where they understand that if they don't change their conduct on a permanent basis, they're facing some long-term imprisonment, perhaps down the road. So they use it sort of as I call it a shock situation.
Representative Stephanie Benfield argued that young offenders might fall through the cracks under this measure.
There are not a lot of community options available, specifically in some of the more rural areas, so I don't think we're going to be seeing some of these kids being placed in alternative community-based facilities.
House Bill 245 passed 102 to 53 and moves to the Senate. As we reported at the beginning of the broadcast, the state Senate today said yes to a proposal asking voters to approve an annual car tag fee of $10 for the Georgia Trauma Trust Fund. The fee would be collected at the same time a tag is issued or re-registered. That resolution passed by a vote of 48 to 8 and now goes to the House.
A bill that requires HIV testing for incarcerated inmates before they are released to the general public passed the Senate earlier today. Senator Kasim Reed expressed his concern about how this disease is especially affecting the African American women in Georgia. Lawmakers Tiana Fernandez is live with more. Tiana.
Thank you, David. Senator Reed explained that there are approximately 1,000 inmates currently infected with HIV, and from this number, approximately 850 are African American men. Senator Reed says that Senate Bill 64 is not directed towards any race and is only voicing his concerns based on statistics coming directly from the Department of Corrections.
One of the 3 leading causes of death for African American women is from HIV infection. And what you're having is many felons who contract HIV during the time that they're in jail. When they are released, they return to the communities where they're from and frequently infect African American women who are not aware of their HIV status.
And just minutes before Senator Reed's bill passed, supporters held a press conference on the Capitol steps to celebrate National Women and Girls HIV and AIDS Awareness Day. According to the founder of a local HIV prevention organization, the number of women infected by HIV has increased 42% since 2000.
We want every corner of the state of Georgia to come together to ban against the spread of HIV and AIDS amongst our communities.
And because the Department of Corrections had a tight fiscal year, Senate Bill 64 was amended in the Senate State Institutions and Property Committee and will not be implemented until appropriate funding is reserved. Again, the bill passed by committee substitute with a vote of 41 to 7 and will now move to the House. Reporting live, I'm Tiana Fernandez for Lawmakers.
Thanks for that report, Tiana. Well, for the second time this session, the state Senate has refused to pass a tort reform bill backed by Governor Sonny Perdue. Instead of the loser pays legislation that the governor wanted, the bill approved by the Senate today stops the clock during the discovery phase of a lawsuit. So if a party files a motion to dismiss at the same time a response is filed, the exchange of information, commonly referred to as discovery, stops for at least 120 days or until the court has ruled on the motion to dismiss. Earlier this session, the Senate rejected a bill backed by the governor, which would have given limited liability to Georgia-based drug makers if a product had already received FDA approval.
Legislation that aims to deter metal theft passed the Senate today. Senator Renee Unterman sponsors SB 82, which changes provisions relating to transaction records and prohibits the sale or purchase of certain metals. Senator Unterman had strong words about an Amendment 1A, which ended up failing.
Are we going to allow thieves to run rampant and an industry to accept the products that they run rampant with? Are we going to promote the drug industry, the crack dealers that are supporting their habit by being thieves? The answer should be, and I believe on your conscience, you will believe and you will know that 1A guts the bill and you will do the right thing. I'm not an attorney. I didn't sit and write all these amendments. I'm not smart enough to sit and write all these amendments to connive and get by. I'm asking you to do the right thing.
And after the 50-5 passage of SB 82, the Senate took up Senator John Crosby's SB 226, known as the Truth in Music Advertising Act. This aims to keep imposters from financially benefiting off the original artist's music. Senator Cecil Staten did have a question about imposters for the freshman Senator Crosby.
Barbra Streisand impersonators, we've had Frank Sinatra. Are you telling me this bill would outlaw this and we would have to stop our major fundraiser in Macon for the Macon Symphony Orchestra? We wouldn't be able to have these people come to perform at our Pops concert?
No, sir. All they have to do is tell the truth and say that I'm really not Neil Diamond, I'm Jack Murphy.
So, Senator, So, Senator, if I may ask you to yield for one final question. So, if we do this in the future, I need to have the Elvis impersonator and all the others just stand up at the beginning of their performance and say, I want you to know I'm not really Elvis Presley. Would that satisfy the law?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Elvis would appreciate that, too.
And SB 226 ended up passing after much serious and humorous debate and now goes over to the House along with SB 239, which came to a vote less than an hour ago. This bill, sponsored by Senator Ronald Ramsey, would in some cases mean jail time for parents who don't enroll their children in a school system within 30 days.
We invite you to check out GPB's online resources at gpb.org/lawmakers. Find out the latest from GPB Radio News team and watch Lawmakers online. All that and more at gpb.org/lawmakers. We invite you to visit that site and vote in our legislative issue poll. We'll bring you the results of that poll later this week.
And our leadership interview series continues today with Senate Democratic Whip David Edelman. I had the opportunity to speak to Senator Edelman earlier this afternoon. I began by asking him about the role of the federal stimulus money in the amended 09 budget, which passed out of both chambers today.
Well, I really just wanted to remind my colleagues in the state legislature about how tough the times are. Georgia has an extremely high rate of unemployment. The state continues to lose jobs by the thousands, and state government is becoming more and more important to people's lives. We most certainly could not have passed a state budget that provides even the most basic essential services without the help of the federal stimulus money, of which there is more than $650 million just in this supplemental budget. And I thought it important for the Senate to just pause for a moment and reflect on where we are in this very difficult economic times, how much people depend on state government, and how important it was that President Obama delivered the stimulus money for Georgia.
Many of the headlines this year have been all about cuts and shifting of agencies and state departments, but what have we seen this year? We're coming up to that crucial crossover 30th day. What have we seen this year that you approve of, and what would you like to see this Thursday, the last day to get things through?
Well, I'm very hopeful that before crossover day, we're able to move a trauma care network bill out of the state Senate and hopefully make it law this year. Georgia is woefully behind in our ability to provide level 1 trauma care to people who are unfortunate enough to suffer severe injuries.
Transportation change has been a sticking point the last couple of years among Republican leadership, and this year they believe they've put something together that will work, but there has been opposition to the rules that this puts in place, including more power for the governor. Explain how you feel about this transportation initiative.
Sure. Well, the traffic, especially in metropolitan Atlanta, is insufferable. And the state really has done nothing for the last 8 years to make the needed infrastructure improvements so that we can relieve some of this traffic. And I'm not just talking about repaving roads and widening intersections. I'm talking about alternative transportation, whether it be high-speed rail, all the way down to walking and cycling paths. We have failed now going on 7 years to provide the funding we need to keep people moving, especially around metropolitan Atlanta, and our economy throughout the state has suffered. What the governor has come up with, frankly, is just a shifting around of the bureaucrats. It really doesn't go to the root of the problem, which is real strategic transportation planning and funding. I'm hopeful that this might be the year we might actually do something rather than just talk, debate, and reorganize at the Department of Transportation.
Well, a lot of this year, as I said before, has been about cuts, and we have seen some transportation initiatives across, but most of the budget still goes to education. What have we seen this year that you approve of, and what would you like to see in the days to come?
Well, unfortunately, not much has happened. I have always been an advocate, along with the support of the Democratic caucuses in both the Senate and the House, of reducing classroom sizes. What we do know works is smaller classroom sizes, where we have more teachers per pupil, student achievement will increase. Unfortunately, over the last 7 years, we haven't made the investments we've needed to, and we really haven't held the the school systems to a tough standard of small classroom sizes. I still hold out hope that this might be the year we may return to a culture that promotes smaller classroom sizes so that our teachers can teach and our students get the attention they deserve.
Okay, Senate Democratic Whip David Edelman, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, David.
The House today gave approval to the governor's plan to restructure the Departments of Human Resources and Community Health. Representative Mickey Chanel presented House Bill 228.
It downsizes DHR by taking mental health, addictive diseases, developmental disabilities, and public health out of DHR. And puts it, this bill calls for a new Department of Public and Behavioral Health. There have been considerable opinions that mental health and public health need additional attention that it is not getting in the current department.
HB 228 passed 147 to 12 and it moves to the Senate. Well, the House failed to pass a measure aimed at preventing pharmacists from prescribing generic drugs to organ transplant patients. Representative John Lunsford spoke in favor of House Bill 523.
A pharmacist may not substitute a generic drug for an immune suppressant pharmaceutical without the consent of the patient and the doctor, unless an emergency situation, in which case the pharmacist can dispense 72 hours of the immunosuppressant drug without that permission if he can't get a hold of either one of them.
This debate brought every one of the pharmacists serving in the House to the well to attest that the losers would be the patients.
This bill is simply an attempt by the drug companies to extend their patent.
The chair of the Health and Human Services Committee disagreed. Representative Sharon Cooper said many pharmacists disregard doctors' orders.
I know that none of our pharmacists in this House, all small owners of small pharmacists, would ever disregard a doctor writing brand necessary on a prescription. But I can tell you, in large pharmacies across this state, it is being ignored.
HB 523 failed to pass. That vote was 64 to 103. Representative Lunsford intends to ask the House to reconsider its decision on Thursday.
And just a reminder, the Georgia General Assembly has adopted a new legislative schedule for the next 4 weeks. For more information on that schedule, we encourage you to visit our website at gpb.org/lawmakers. We will continue to bring you all the latest Capitol news on legislative days. Because the General Assembly is in recess tomorrow, Lawmakers returns on Thursday, March 12th at 7 p.m. And if you have missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. on GPB or 7 a.m. on GPB Knowledge. You can also keep up with all of the action under the Gold Dome daily on your local GPB radio station during Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and Georgia Gazette. Well, coming up next on GPB Television, Georgia Outdoors. Tonight's episode features backyard habitats. Georgia Outdoors is next here on GPB Television.
And that's our broadcast for the 29th legislative day of the 2009 session. I'm Wandy Lawson.
And I'm David Zelski. Join us Thursday at 7 p.m. for Lawmakers. Good night.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.